My name is Emily Harper, and I'm 32 years old. 3 years ago, my sister told my parents I dropped out of law school. She lied. That one calculated lie ripped me out of my family like I never existed. They cut me off completely. They blocked my number. They didn't show up for my graduation. They weren't there on my wedding day. For 3 full years, I was no one's daughter, no one's sister, just a name they refused to speak. Then last month, everything flipped in the most brutal way possible. My sister was rushed into the emergency room at Mobile General single vehicle crash, severe internal injuries, vitals crashing. The trauma team activated level 1. The chief of trauma surgery was paged. The double doors flew open, and the attending walked straight toward the stretcher. When my mother looked up and read the name stitched on the white coat, Dr. Emily Harper, MDFACS, Chief of Trauma Surgery, her hand shot out and clamped onto my father's forearm with such force that her fingers left deep purple bruises on his skin. His face went white. Her eyes widened in pure shock. In that split second, the entire waiting room seemed to freeze because the doctor they were begging to save their daughter was the child they had erased. I stood there in scrubs gloves, still on, staring at the family that had spent 3 years pretending I was gone. The irony hit harder than any scalpel ever could. The woman who destroyed my life was now bleeding out on my table, and the parents who believed her lies were about to discover exactly who I had become without them. Before we dive deeper, if this story is already pulling at something inside you, please hit like and subscribe. It really helps these stories reach the people who need them. And if you're watching right now, drop your city and the local time in the comments below. I love seeing where everyone is tuning in from while this unfolds. Now let me take you back to the fall 3 years ago to a kitchen table in Birmingham, Alabama, and the last time my father ever looked at me with anything close to pride. Growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, our house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac with a manicured lawn, two-car garage, and an American flag that Dad raised every morning without fail. It looked like every other solid middle-class home on the block, the kind where neighbors wave and kids ride bikes until dusk. My parents, Matthew and Amanda Harper, had built their life around two unspoken rules: maintain appearances at all costs and demand obedience without question. Dad managed a manufacturing plant that churned out auto parts for Detroit, long shifts, steady pay, the sort of job that let him feel he had the world under control. Mom handled part-time bookkeeping from the spare bedroom, her spreadsheets always balanced, her voice never raised. They weren't wealthy, but they took quiet pride in what they had achieved through hard work and discipline, and they expected their children to mirror that same polished image back to them. There were 3 of us yet. From the beginning, only 2 seemed to count. My older sister Brittany arrived in the world, already performing school plays, student council cheer squad, the girl who could walk into any room and make adults laugh or nod in approval. 3 years ahead of me, she had landed a marketing coordinator job at a mid-sized firm downtown right after college, the kind of role that kept her visible and admired. My brother Tyler, sandwiched between us, stayed steady and low-key, 2 years older than Brittany, working construction, coming home dusty, but never causing waves. He was the neutral one, the sibling who observed more than he spoke, who sided with whoever kept the peace. Then there was me, quiet always with a book or notebook, the one who preferred lab experiments to parties. I wasn't defiant or troublesome. I was simply easy to miss, fading into the background like wallpaper nobody noticed. The favoritism showed itself in small, consistent ways that added up over time. In 8th grade, I made it to the state science fair, the only kid from our middle school. I built a water filtration model from recycled materials, spent weeks testing prototypes, and brought home 2nd place. That same weekend, Brittany starred in the community theater's production of Annie. My parents chose the show. When I walked in with the ribbon, Dad gave it a quick glance over his morning coffee and muttered, "That's nice, Em." He didn't ask about the project. Mom smiled briefly, then hurried off to help Brittany with her lines. I swallowed the hurt, convinced myself it didn't matter. I told myself academic success would eventually force them to see me, so I doubled down. AP classes, debate team perfect, GPA college applications stacked like ammunition. The acceptance letter from UCLA law arrived like a sudden spotlight. I was 18, staring at the envelope on the kitchen table, while Dad read it aloud slowly as if tasting each word. University of California, Los Angeles School of Law. His eyebrows lifted. He looked at me, really looked, and said the phrase I'd waited 18 years to hear. Maybe you'll make something of yourself after all. It wasn't tender. It wasn't overflowing. But it was acknowledgement, raw and real, and I held it like oxygen. Mom called her sister that night, called neighbors, her voice carrying a pitch of genuine pride I'd never heard aimed at me before. Emily got into law school, can you believe it? Across the table. Brittany smiled, the expression stopping neatly at her mouth, while her eyes did something sharper, calculating, measuring the shift in attention. At the time, I mistook it for fatigue from her drive home. That weekend, the calls started. How's packing going? Who's sharing your apartment? What's Los Angeles really like? She remembered every name I mentioned, professors, classmates, even the roommate assignment. She asked follow-up questions that felt thoughtful, almost sisterly. I thought perhaps achievement had finally unlocked something between us, a bridge over years of distance. I answered every question, openly grateful for the attention. What I didn't see was the quiet recalibration happening behind her smile the moment the spotlight tilted and she began to feel it slipping. You can sense those invisible pivots between siblings, even when you can't name them, yet the subtle tightening, the flicker in the gaze, when someone realizes the balance might change. I felt it without understanding it. A faint unease I brushed aside because for once, the house felt warmer, the approval real. Third year of law school, that's when everything cracked. Third year of law school started like any other long nights in the library case. Briefs piling up, the constant grind of exams and outlines. My roommate and best friend Kayla Riley had been my anchor since day one. She grew up in foster care, no family to fall back on, just grit and a sharp mind that matched mine. We shared an apartment near campus, split rent, studied together until dawn, and she was the one person who made Los Angeles feel less lonely. When she got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer that August, everything stopped. No family meant no support system, just me. I went to the dean's office the next morning, explained the situation, and they approved a formal leave of absence for 1 semester under caregiver status. Paperwork filed, spot held for January return. It was all documented, legitimate, above board. I moved into the spare room at her place, drove her to chemo. Sat with her through nights when the pain made breathing impossible. I called Brittany one evening after a rough, round voice shaking, needing to tell someone. She listened, voice soft and sympathetic. "Oh, Em, I'm so sorry. Take the time you need. I won't say anything to Mom and Dad, they'd just worry." 3 days later, she called them. I don't know the exact words she used that night, but I learned the full scope much later. What I got was a phone call at 11 p.m. while I sat in a plastic chair next to Kayla's hospital bed, IV beeping her hand cold in mine after a bad reaction to the latest infusion. Dad's voice came through flat and cold. "Your sister told us everything. The dropping out, the boyfriend with the drug problem, all of it." I tried to interrupt, heart slamming. "Dad, that's not—" He cut me off. "She showed us the messages. Proof. Proof. Fake screenshots. Brittany had fabricated texts, supposedly from a non-existent boyfriend, begging me to quit school for him." I pressed my palm against the wall to steady myself. "I'm in a hospital right now taking care of Kayla. Call the dean, I can give you the number." Mom got on the line, voice trembling. "How could you lie to us for a whole year, Emily?" I begged them to listen. Offered every piece of evidence, the leave paperwork, Kayla's oncologist's contact. Dad's final words landed like ice. "Don't call this house until you're ready to tell the truth. You've embarrassed this family enough." The line went dead. I sat on that hospital floor for what felt like hours, phone still warm in my hand, the monitor beeping steadily behind the curtain. 3 days later, Tyler texted me once, "You're destroying the family. Stop lying." Then nothing. I tried everything in those 3 desperate days. 10 calls that went from ringing to blocked, 2 emails with the leave PDF attached, and the dean's direct line, 1 handwritten letter mailed, priority that came back unopened with mom's handwriting on the envelope marking it, returned to sender. Nicole, Dad's younger sister, and the only relative who'd ever treated me equally, called Dad that evening after I reached out to her. She told me later his response was short, "Stay out of it, she's made her bed." She tried to explain the leave of absence. He hung up. In that silence, I became no one's daughter. Kayla's condition worsened, and I poured every remaining ounce of energy into her care, driving to appointments, holding her hand during scans, reading aloud when she couldn't sleep. The hospital corridors became my world, fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells the only constants. I kept asking myself how one lie could erase a child so completely, how parents could choose belief over evidence without a single question. The betrayal wasn't just the words, it was the ease with which they accepted them, the speed with which they turned away. Kayla died on a Sunday morning in December. The room held only the final flat tone of the monitor and pale winter light slanting through the blinds. I was alone with her. No family, no crowd, just me holding her hand as the last breath left. I organized a small service at a chapel near campus that could hold 60, but seated only 6, a former foster sister who drove up from San Diego, 2 classmates, a nurse who'd grown fond of her during late shifts. I stood at the front and read a short eulogy to mostly empty pews, voice steady because I'd already cried every tear possible over the previous months. That night, I sat in our apartment, her coffee mug still on the counter, her jacket hanging by the door like she might walk in any minute. I opened my laptop to the re-enrollment form for law school, stared at it for a long time, then found the yellow sticky note she'd tucked inside our shared copy of a medical textbook we'd borrowed as a joke. Her handwriting shaky from the last weeks. "Finish as doctor for me. Become the one I know you are. Don't let anyone, especially blood, tell you who you are." She had written it when she still could hold a pen, knowing she wouldn't be there to push me herself. I closed the laptop, opened it again, and switched the application to medical school instead. Law had been the path I'd chosen to prove something to people who never asked. Medicine was the one that chose me through Kayla's fight. The transition wasn't clean or simple. I reapplied to programs in Los Angeles, scraped together references, got accepted off a wait list when someone deferred. I took on massive student loans that would follow me for decades, picked up a part-time research assistant position in the oncology lab where Kayla had been treated, survived on hospital cafeteria leftovers more nights than I can count, cold sandwiches at 3 a.m., vending machine coffee that tasted like regret. Medical school didn't care about grief or family silence. Anatomy dissections ran on schedule, clinical rotations stretched 12 hours, even when exhaustion blurred the edges of my vision. I learned to compartmentalize, scrub, in focus on the patient, scrub out collapse in the on-call room. There were nights I cried in supply closets, but I stopped letting the tears slow me down. I worked because the work demanded it, and because somewhere in the rhythm of rounds and sutures, I found a version of myself that didn't need approval from anyone else. I graduated on time, matched into a surgical residency at a Level 1 trauma center in Mobile, Alabama, far enough from Birmingham to breathe freely, but close enough that the state line still felt like a thin scar. No one from home came to the ceremony. I walked across the stage, a lone diploma heavy in my hand, and felt a strange, quiet triumph mixed with the familiar hollow space. During third-year residency, I met Joshua Brooks at a community clinic near the hospital where he volunteered pro bono as a civil rights attorney. Calm eyes, dry humor that cut through tension. The first person I told the full story to who didn't flinch or offer quick fixes. He listened without interruption, then said 4 words that landed softly. You deserve better. We married on a Saturday afternoon in the backyard of a friend's house in the Montgomery suburbs, 30 guest string lights draped over the fence, simple vows spoken under late afternoon sun. Nicole flew in and cried enough for 2 parents hugging me tight at the end of the aisle. I sent an invitation to Birmingham. It came back unopened, same as the letter years before. Tyler added his own message the day before the ceremony, a single text that read, "You're dead to us." I deleted it without replying and stepped forward anyway. The life we built afterward felt earned in a way nothing before ever had. A small house with a porch that caught the morning light. Joshua's laugh filling the kitchen every evening as he tried and failed to cook dinner without burning something. A golden retriever named Scout, who greeted me at the door after long shifts with no judgment, only tail wags and wet kisses. I became chief of trauma surgery at the mobile center, the youngest in the department's history, hands steady in the OR, even when old memories tried to surface. The ache of absence never disappeared completely. It lived in quiet moments like setting the table for 2 instead of more, but it no longer defined the shape of my days. I had constructed something solid from the ruins brick by deliberate brick, with people who chose to show up every single time. 3 years passed. Brittany never let the story fade. Instead, she nurtured it like a carefully tended garden, turning vague rumors into family gospel at every gathering in Birmingham. At Thanksgivings, she would lower her voice when cousins asked why I wasn't there, eyes glistening just enough. We don't talk about Emily anymore. It's too painful for Mom and Dad after what she did. The silence that followed did the real work, letting everyone fill in the blanks with sympathy for the loyal daughter who stayed. But she layered on details that stung more than absence. She told our grandmother I was living on the streets out west, told Uncle Pete's wife she'd heard through old high school friends that I was bouncing in and out of rehab. On Christmas Eve 2 years ago, she sat with Mom at the kitchen table and said she'd tried reaching out multiple times, but I refused to answer that I was the one who cut them off for good. She flipped the script so completely that their grief became evidence of my betrayal, and she remained the steady one who never wavered. Tyler reinforced every word without hesitation. He didn't invent the stories, but he never challenged them either. At family barbecues, he'd shrug when my name came up. Emily hates us, she made her choice years ago. He said it with quiet conviction, as if repeating it often enough made it fact protecting the fragile peace that kept the house from questioning itself. Brittany pushed even further behind the scenes. She called my medical school twice, using a burner name trying to convince admissions the caregiver leave was fraudulent and that I was too unstable to continue. The dean shut it down fast. Records sealed, documents verified, but the attempt showed how deep her reach still went. Nicole remained my only quiet link to that world. She called on Sundays, voice always measured, sharing fragments, only when the moment felt safe. Brittany's divorce 2 years earlier, her switch to selling medical devices, the irony landed like a quiet slap. Nicole never forced the conversation, but made sure I knew the narrative was still alive, still spreading through aunts, uncles, cousins, like slow poison. Joshua caught the trail first. 6 months ago, he set his coffee mug down with deliberate care, the way he does when the news is heavy. I didn't tell you right away because I wasn't sure how you'd take it. 2 years back, his HR contact at the hospital flagged an anonymous inquiry about my employment disciplinary history credential validity. He had a colleague run the trace. The IP traced straight back to Birmingham. The kitchen went quiet. Scout's tail thumped once against the tile. The coffee maker hissed in the background. She's still hunting me, I said, the words tasting bitter. Joshua nodded slowly. This isn't rivalry anymore. This is obsession. Those whispers spread like fire through dry grass, and I kept wondering whether the truth would ever catch up to the blaze Brittany had started. The lies had become the official family record, repeated so often they felt unbreakable while I lived 3 states away, proving something different with every life I pulled back from the edge in the OR. January, present day. Nicole called on a Thursday evening, voice lower than usual. Emily, there's something you need to know about Brittany. It's concerning. She hesitated, then said she'd heard Brittany was unraveling more drinking erratic behavior, driving too fast on the interstate. Before she could finish, my pager went off. Trauma activation. I told her I'd call back and hurried to the hospital. January present day. I was 32, chief of trauma surgery at Mobile General, the kind of life I'd built from nothing, house with a porch that caught morning light, Joshua's steady presence beside me every night, Scout waiting at the door with tail thumping. The pager woke me at 3:07 a.m. Level 1 MVC, single female, 35. Blunt abdominal trauma, hemodynamically unstable, ETA 8 minutes. I dressed in 4 minutes, drove in 6 roads, empty and slick under January black. In the ambulance bay, I badged in team, already assembling 2 residents, scrubbing in trauma nurse prepping lines, anesthesia on standby. I grabbed the intake iPad from the charge nurse's station and swiped to the incoming chart. Patient Brittany Harper, DOB, March 14, 1990. Emergency contact, Matthew Harper, father. The hallway noise, beeping monitors, intercom pages, squeak of shoes on linoleum, receded like a tide pulling back. For 2 seconds, I wasn't chief surgeon. I was 29 again, sitting on a hospital floor in Los Angeles, with a dead phone in my hand after Dad hung up. Linda appeared at my shoulder. You okay? I blinked, set the iPad down. Prep Bay 2, Paige Patel for standby. The siren grew closer. Behind it came the family I hadn't faced in 3 years. The stretcher burst through the doors. Brittany strapped down, unconscious, oxygen mask, fogging shallow breaths, blood soaking her shirt, one hand dangling limp off the rail. Paramedics rattled vitals, pressure tanking, heart rate spiking, 2 large-bore IVs wide open. Running behind Mom and Dad. Mom in a bathrobe, slippers, mismatched hair thin and wild from sleep. Dad in flannel and jeans thrown on in panic, face the color of old paper. That's my daughter, he shouted past the triage nurse. Where are they taking her? I need the doctor in charge. Carla put both hands up. Sir, family to the surgical waiting area. The chief is handling this personally. Dad grabbed her arm. Get me the chief now. Carla glanced through the glass partition, read my badge. Dr. Emily Harper, MD, F, ACS, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Her eyes widened a fraction. I gave a small headshake. Not yet. She composed herself. The chief is prepping for surgery. You'll be updated. Waiting room is this way. They were led down the hall. Mom whispered prayers, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles blanched. Dad kept turning back, peering through every window. She's all we have, he said to no one. Please, she's all we have. I heard every word through the glass partition, as if I'd never existed at all. In the scrub room, I allowed 30 seconds alone. Hot water over my hands, reflection in the stainless steel mirror, warped like everything felt. Scrub cap on badge, visible face of a woman surgically removed from her own family tree, now asked to surgically save the woman who held the saw. Part of me wanted to Paige Patel, let someone else carry this debt. Let them owe their daughter's life to a stranger instead of me. But a woman lay on that table with a ruptured spleen and grade 3 liver laceration bleeding faster than we could replace. She would die in 30 to 40 minutes without the best surgeon in the building. And the best surgeon in the building was me. I paged Patel directly. Conflict of interest. Patient is family. Disclosing now and documenting in the chart. If at any point my judgment is compromised, you take the lead. His voice steady through the speaker. Understood, Chief. Linda noted the disclosure in the nursing record. Everything by the book, everything on paper. I pulled on fresh gloves, pushed through the OR doors, and looked down at the table. Brittany's face, bruised, oxygen mask fogging and clearing. She looked smaller than I remembered, thinner worry lines carved deeper around her eyes. For 3 seconds, she wasn't the architect of my erasure. She was a body in crisis. Let's go, scalpel. 3 hours and 40 minutes to rebuild what the crash had torn apart. Ruptured spleen out, liver laceration repaired with precision sutures layer by painstaking layer. Mecentric bleeding clamped, cauterized, controlled. Hands moved as trained, steady, deliberate, fast, when speed mattered, slow, when precision mattered more. Residents watched, attention sharpening on the tricky liver repair. I didn't falter. At 6:48 a.m., I placed the final stitch. Vital stable, BP normalized, output clear. Patel pulled his mask down. Emily, that was flawless. Want me to talk to the family? I peeled off gloves, dropped them in the bin. No, this one's mine. I caught my reflection in the scrub room mirror, same face, same badge. But something had shifted. For 3 years, I'd been the daughter who disappeared. Now I was the surgeon who'd just pulled her sister back from the edge of death. Those two facts were about to collide in a waiting room 40 feet away in front of my entire night shift team. I straightened my scrub top, checked my badge, took one breath, then walked toward the waiting room. The hallway had never felt so long. The waiting room had that fluorescent hush hospitals get at 7 in the morning. 2 other families scattered in far corners. A television murmured weather reports to no one. In the center row, sitting rigid, sleepless, terrified, were my parents. I pushed through the double doors, still in surgical scrubs, mask pulled down around my neck, cap off, now hair pulled back. Badge hanging at chest level in clean block letters anyone could read from 6 feet away. Dr. Emily Harper, M.D.F., ACS, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Dad stood first, reflex to be in charge. Doctor, how is she? Is Brittany? He stopped. Eyes dropped to the badge, rose to my face, dropped again. Recognition moved through him like something physical, a tremor starting in his hands and climbing to his jaw. Mom looked up a half-second later. Lips parted. No sound. Her right hand shot to Dad's forearm and clamped down, fingers digging into the flannel with force that would later leave 4 bruises shaped like fingertips. 5 seconds of silence that held 3 years. I spoke first, calm, clinical, the same voice I used for every family in that room. Mr. and Mrs. Harper, I'm Dr. Harper, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Your daughter Brittany sustained a ruptured spleen and grade 3 liver laceration in the accident. Surgery was successful. She's stable and currently in ICU. You'll be able to see her in approximately 1 hour. Mr. and Mrs. Not Mom and Dad. I watched that land. I watched it cut. Behind me through the glass partition, Linda and 2 nurses were watching. They knew by the look on their faces. They'd already put it together. Mom moved first. She took a step toward me, arms lifting, a sob already breaking through her chest. Emily. Oh my God. Oh my God, Emily. I stepped back. Half a step. Polite. Unmistakable. She froze. Her hands hung in the air between us, then slowly, painfully dropped to her sides. Dad's voice came out like gravel dragged over concrete. You're a doctor. I am. Chief. I am. But Brittany said what exactly? He closed his mouth, opened it, closed it again. I could see the machinery of his mind trying to reassemble 3 years of certainty that was crumbling in real time. Mom was crying now, not quietly. We thought you dropped out. We thought she told us you were. She told you I dropped out. That I had a boyfriend with a drug problem. That I was homeless. That I refused to contact you. I kept my voice level. No shaking. No tears. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in the shower, in the car, in the dark before sleep. I never thought it would happen in surgical scrubs under fluorescent lights. None of it was true, not a single word. Through the glass behind me, I could see Carla press a hand to her mouth. A resident looked away, jaw tight. Linda sat down her clipboard and stared. Dad tried to redirect. Old instinct. This isn't the time or place, Emily. Your sister is in the ICU. I know. I just spent 3 hours and 40 minutes making sure she survives. So yes, Dad, I'm aware of where she is. He had nothing. For the first time in my life, my father, a man who had never been at a loss for a decree, had absolutely nothing. The silence was doing the work I never could. 3 years of blocked calls, returned letters, ignored emails. None of it had made a dent. But standing here alive and accomplished and wearing the proof on my chest that was louder than anything I could have written in a letter. Mom reached for the back of a chair to steady herself. The letters, she whispered. You said you sent letters. 2 emails with my leave of absence paperwork attached. 1 handwritten letter mailed priority. You sent it back unopened. I recognized your handwriting on the envelope. She pressed her fist against her mouth. Dad stared at the floor. I called 10 times in 3 days. I asked Nicole to talk to you. You told her to stay out of it. I wasn't accusing, I was reciting. These were facts, and facts don't need volume. Then Linda appeared at the door. She didn't know the full story, not yet, but she had hospital business. Dr. Harper, I'm sorry to interrupt. The board chair saw the overnight trauma log. He asked me to pass along that the Physician of the Year selection committee sends their congratulations on tonight's surgical outcome. Linda said it the way she'd say anything routine. She had no idea she'd just detonated a second bomb. Mom looked at me, eyes swollen, mascara gone, bathrobe still on. Physician of the Year. It's an internal recognition. It's nothing. I turned to Linda. Thank you. I need to check post-op vitals. Excuse me. I walked toward the ICU corridor, measured steps, spine straight. I didn't look back, but I heard my mother's voice behind me, small and ruined. Matthew, what have we done? And I heard something I'd never heard before. My father saying nothing. Because silence for the first time was the only honest thing he had left. 4 hours later, ICU room 6. Monitors beeped in steady rhythm. Morning light angled through half-closed blinds. I walked in for the standard post-op assessment, vitals, drainage, output, wound check routine, except nothing about this was routine. Brittany's eyes were open, glassy from morphine, but focused enough to track me as I approached. She squinted at my badge, read it once, read it again. Color drained from her face the way I've seen in patients given terminal news. Emily, her voice rasped like sandpaper. Good morning, Brittany. I'm your attending surgeon. You sustained a ruptured spleen and grade 3 liver laceration from the accident. Surgery went well. You're going to make a full recovery. She blinked slowly. You're a doctor. Chief of this department. Have been for 2 years. Confusion first, then disbelief, then fear, and finally the familiar flicker calculation. Even now, sutured and sedated, she was trying to find the angle. Emily, listen. I can explain. You don't need to explain anything to me. I nodded toward the glass door where Mom and Dad stood in the hallway, faces wrecked, eyes red. You need to explain it to them. I updated her chart, checked the drain, left without another word. I didn't stay to hear what followed, but the entire ICU floor heard it. The room wasn't soundproof, and the truth wasn't either. Brittany started crying the moment they walked, in big, heaving sobs that pulled at her stitches and spiked the heart monitor. Mom, Dad, you have to believe me. I never meant for it to go this far. I was scared for her. Dad stood at the foot of the bed, voice barely controlled. Brittany Emily is a surgeon, chief of trauma surgery at this hospital. I didn't know that. Mom's voice flat, hollow. She said she sent letters, emails, called 10 times, asked Nicole to intervene. She's exaggerating. You know how she... Nicole tried to tell us. Dad's voice cracked, not from sadness, but from the structural failure of everything he'd believed for 3 years. 2 years ago, Nicole called and said Emily was in residency, a surgeon. You told us Nicole was lying, causing drama. Nicole doesn't know the whole story. What is the full story, Brittany? Mom's scream echoed down the hall. Nurses flinched at the station. A patient's visitor looked up from their phone. Brittany backed into the corner of the bed, IVs in both arms, my sutures in her abdomen, and did what she always did. Pivoted from defense to offense. Fine, she's a doctor. Good for her. But she abandoned this family. She never called. Because you told us to block her, Brittany. Dad's hand on the rail, knuckles white. Because you said she was dangerous. The heart monitor beeped faster. The IV dripped, and Brittany, for perhaps the first time in her adult life, had no script left. Nicole walked in at 9:45 that morning. I'd called her from the scrub room after surgery not to weaponize her, but because Brittany was her niece too. But Nicole came prepared. 3 years of silence will do that to a woman with a filing system and a long memory. She stood in the middle of the room and said, "I've been waiting 3 years for this conversation, and I'm not waiting one more minute." She pulled out her phone, opened a folder labeled Emily Proof. Screenshots of every email I'd sent in those desperate first days. The leave of absence PDF from UCLA, signed by the dean, stamped re-enrollment confirmation. Photo of my residency graduation, me in cap and gown, Nicole beside me, the only family in the frame. She held the phone out. Mom took it with trembling hands. "And here," Nicole said, swiping to a text thread from Brittany 4 years ago. She read aloud, "Don't tell Mom and Dad about Emily's residency. It'll just confuse them. They're finally at peace." The room went still. Brittany stared at the ceiling. Her jaw set, but the calculation was gone from her eyes. What replaced it was the look of someone who'd run out of rooms to hide in. "You told me to keep quiet for the family's sake," Nicole said, looking straight at Brittany. "But this family hasn't had peace. It's had a 3-year blackout." She turned to my parents. "And you two let this happen, not because you didn't love Emily, but because loving Brittany was easier." Nobody argued. There was nothing left. Mom sank into the chair beside the bed, scrolling through Nicole's phone, reading my emails one by one. Her lips moved as she read. She stopped on the last one the night before my residency graduation. "Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. I graduated today. I wish you were here. I'm still your daughter. I never stopped being your daughter." Mom doubled over, not crying. It was beyond that. The sound of someone meeting the full weight of a mistake they could never undo. Dad stood at the window back to the room, shoulders shaking. Nicole told me later it was the first time she'd seen her older brother cry in 60 years. Not at their mother's funeral. Not when his plant nearly closed. Not ever. He cried now silently, facing the parking lot while the monitor beeped behind him. Brittany lay in the bed. She'd stopped talking. The IV dripped, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. There was nothing left to perform. No audience that would believe her. The persona she'd worn for 35 years lay in pieces on the linoleum, and no amount of charm or tears or reframing would put it back together. I came back that afternoon, end of my shift, 22 hours since the pager woke me. My parents were still there. Of course they were. Mom stood up the second I walked in, her face, swollen eyes nearly shut from crying. "Emily, baby, I'm so sorry. I held up my hand, gentle but firm. "I hear you, and I believe you're sorry. But sorry is a word. It's a starting place, not a finish line. What I need is time." Dad turned from the window. He looked like he'd aged 3 years since morning. "We want to make this right." Then understand something. This wasn't anger. This was clarity. The kind that comes after you've burned through every other emotion. "I'm not the girl you sent away. I'm not the girl who begged you to listen for 3 days from 3,000 miles away. I'm someone who built a whole life without you. And if you want any part of it now, it will be on my terms. Not Brittany's, not yours, mine." Dad opened his mouth, old reflex, then closed it and nodded. A small, devastated nod. I looked at Brittany on the bed, her eyes open, watching me. "When you're recovered," I said, "you and I are going to have a conversation. A real one. But not today. Today you're my patient. I don't mix the two." I left. Spine straight. Steps measured. I didn't turn around. I wasn't closing the door forever, but I was the one who decided when, if ever, it opened again. Brittany was discharged 2 weeks later. Incision healing. The rest of her, not so much. The scandal spread fast. Family group chats lit up. Facebook posts from cousins and aunts questioning everything she'd ever said. A private group for Harper relatives turned into a boycott. Invitations stopped, calls went unanswered. Brittany lost 2 major marketing contracts within a month. Clients cited personal instability after whispers reached their networks. She was left scrambling for freelance gigs that barely covered rent. Mom and Dad tried counseling in West Birmingham. A therapist named Dr. Ellis, calm and direct. Mom went twice, broke down both times, then stopped going. Dad sat through 3 sessions, answered in monosyllables, then quit. Their marriage frayed, separate bedrooms, quiet dinners, the kind of distance that creeps in when grief has nowhere to go. Tyler's job at the construction firm suffered too. Coworkers heard the family drama leak through mutual friends, and the teasing turned cold. He was passed over for a promotion he'd been promised. I never saw them again. Numbers blocked, emails filtered. No more Sunday calls from Nicole. She respected the boundary. Joshua and I kept our life steady. Porch mornings with coffee. Scout chasing shadows in the yard, long shifts balanced by quiet evenings. The ache still lived between my ribs, but it no longer ruled me. Truth always outruns lies, but self-worth is the real revenge. You don't need to destroy anyone. You just need to become someone they can no longer erase. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story made you think, if it stirred something about forgiveness or self-protection, share your thoughts below. I'd like to hear them.